Thanks, Camilla. That's really great.
Okay.
You. Hi everybody, good morning. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, all about teaching children to write. I was just saying to Camilla actually how excited I was to be doing this webinar today, because I talk so much about reading. I don't actually talk quite so much about writing, and as I was writing this presentation, I was getting really excited about writing, because actually teaching a child to write is a really special thing to do. So I'm really excited to share some ideas and hopefully some practical tips with you today. Hopefully you have a cup of tea, some snacks, and we can take an hour together to really indulge in supporting our children in writing. Thank you to Witherslack Group, who is a charity who's hosting this webinar. They are a charity who support parents with children who have SEND. This PowerPoint and presentation is relevant for parents of children with SEND, but also it's relevant for children without SEND as well, parents who want to support their child with their writing. So let's begin. I'm going to start off with a question that people say to me so much. I often hear someone say, my child can read that, but they just can't write it. Is that a problem? And over my kind of 13 years of working with schools, I've kind of developed a stock answer, which is, I can read Harry Potter easily, but I can't write it. And it's one of those light bulb moments, I think, sometimes for people, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, that's so true, actually. I can read that novel, but there's no way that I could have written it. So I want us to keep that in mind as we go through today, that even though our children might be able to read something, it really doesn't mean that they can write it, because writing is a lot harder than reading. I'm going to tell you why today. So even though I can read Harry Potter really quite easily, I could read it on the train and not get distracted. I don't need to look up any words. I can decode the words very easily. I can read Harry Potter and I can appreciate that there is a unique magical system. There's intricate storylines that there's no way I could write myself, complex backstories to every character, rich descriptive language that I would no way think of myself. And just because I can read and appreciate all of these things, it really doesn't mean that I could write Harry Potter. So keep that in your mind. Even though your child might be able to read that sentence, it really doesn't mean at the moment that they could write it. I want us first of all to think about how much you write. So if you've got some paper and a pen in front of you, you could jot down some of these answers to these questions. So thinking about your own writing, my first question, how often do you write on paper at home? Just think about that answer or jot it down if you've got some paper in front of you. My next question, how often does your child see you writing on paper at home? And my final question, what genres does your child see you writing? So do they see you writing a shopping list, birthday cards, diaries? So my answers to these questions would be, my child probably sees me write once a week at home, maybe twice a week. He would see me writing my to-do list, because I normally write that on paper, and he would see me writing a shopping list. He might sometimes see me writing a birthday card. So they're really the only three things that he would see me writing. He doesn't see me writing the things that he would be expected to write in school. He doesn't see me writing a story map or a story or a letter. He doesn't see me writing a wanted poster. These are all genres that we would be expecting our children to have a go at school. However, they're not really getting much modelling of that. So the first thing I want us to think about is upping our own modelling of writing at home. So where you can, pick up a pen or a pencil and some paper and write in front of your child, because the more they see you writing, the more they will understand the purpose of writing. And of course, the purpose of writing is to communicate with somebody. You're writing a message to communicate with somebody else. So that's the first thing to think about, modelling your own writing, excuse me, a bit more as much as you can. And it's something that I've thought of certainly since having my child, and thinking about his own writing, thinking actually he doesn't really see me doing much writing at home, and if he does, it's normally on my phone. You know, lots of our writing does happen on our phone. You know, same as you probably. I write in my calendar on my phone. I you know, use text messages, of course, and emails on my phone. Or he's seeing me on my laptop. So actually the writing that we do often is using technology, but we're expecting our children to pick up a pen and have a go on paper, but they just don't see that at home. So that's the first thing to think about. Let's think about how phonics links to writing. So obviously my specialism is phonics, and that's where my whole Instagram account has come from, and that's what I do for my job. I'm a phonics consultant, so I support schools with their phonics teaching. So using our phonics for writing, we're thinking first of all in basic terms of a word that we want to write. So we might want to write the word green, for example. We have to then segment that word into the sounds. So we have to think of the sounds that we can hear in the word we want to write. So g, r, e, n would be the sounds in green. We then have to retrieve from our memory the visual representation of those sounds. So e.g. what the letters or the graphemes look like. The grapheme is the sound written down. So it's not as easy as reading where we're just looking at the letters and we're remembering what they say, we're decoding. Here we're having to pull from memory what the visual representation of that sound is, and then write it down in the correct order using a comfortable pencil grip. So actually writing is quite tricky, and we call this encoding. So this is the process of spelling a word, thinking of the sounds in that word, thinking of what the visual representation of those sounds looks like, and then writing down those graphemes in the correct order. And of course, that's just one word. So actually, if we're wanting to write a whole paragraph, that's actually quite a lot that we're expecting our children to be able to do. But that's how we're using our phonics for writing. Of course, as well, the further along we get in our writing journey, there might be a different grapheme choice to make. So it might be that actually in the word green, we know that it's double E making the E sound. However, there's no reason why it's EE and not EA, like in the word dream, it just is. And so actually children then start to have to make a grapheme choice later on as well. So it does take a lot to be a writer. We're going to think about all the things that go in that cooking pot to be a writer, and we're going to take them one by one and think about how we can support our children this morning. Correct letter formation is the first one, and so many children I work with, whether they have SEND or not, struggle with correct letter formation and holding their pencil correctly. Correct spelling, correct spacing of words, otherwise it's very hard to read if the words are all jumbled up. Correct punctuation, so we know when to pause. The ideas for writing, and sentence structure and any genre specific rules. So for example, if we're writing a letter that we've got dear whoever at the top and then we leave a line. So all of those genre specific rules that come up as our children learn to write. Today, we're not going to focus so much on sentence structure or genre specific rules, but all the ones in bold, we're going to take one by one and have a think about how we can help the children, what they might struggle with and what we can do at home to try to help. So first of all, let's look at correct letter formation. So the first thing that helps correct letter formation is a step before that, and that is pencil grip. Pencil grip is a really important one. I personally have a terrible pencil grip. I clearly was never really taught as a child to hold my pencil properly. I have a really sort of hard hold of my pen when I have my pencil grip, and it's not, as you can see there, it's not very good. That's my pencil grip. A child really should have a nice light hold using a tripod grip of their pen or their pencil like this. To help pencil grip, we can use what we call crocodile fingers. So when I'm first teaching children to hold a pencil, I tell them to snap their fingers like a crocodile, and then we place our pen or our pencil in the middle of the crocodile's mouth, and then we bend that top one, and that should give us a nice pencil grip. and then they might loop their thumb around a little bit more to kind of hold it a bit more tightly. But generally that crocodile finger grip, that pinching grip, is what we want. That should be the most comfortable way for a child to hold their pen or pencil. When I was teaching pencil grip to my son at home, he was really struggling with me just saying crocodile fingers, and he was holding his pencil in a fist like this. And that went on for a long time, actually, where he was holding it in a fist. I wasn't worried. He was 3 and 4 years old, so I knew that at some point he would stop this. But I did feel that I needed to help him to stop this, because he was actually drawing really quite intricately, but he was holding his pen and pencil like this, which I started to think, maybe I should actually look at helping him with that a bit. So I got some pencil grippers for him. You can get them really easily on Amazon. They're just like rubber grippers, which kind of force them to hold their pencil in a tripod grip. And with every pen and pencil in the whole house, I put a gripper on. So there was no escaping the pencil gripper. And that really, really helped him. It was the only way that I could get him to stop holding his pencil like that. And it's funny because as a teacher, I'd never actually used pencil grippers. They seemed a bit gimmicky to me, if I'm honest. I had them in my cupboard, but I never really wanted to use them. I was sort of like, oh no, they should be learning to do that on their own without a pencil gripper. But actually, sort of having now done it from the other side as a parent, I found that the pencil gripper helped massively for us. And you can just type pencil grips into Amazon and loads come up. We just got the rubber tripod ones. So pencil grippers can really help a child with their pencil grip when they're holding their pencil or pen. Some phonics programs have a letter formation phrase that helps the child know how to write that letter. So much of my time when I'm looking at children's books, when we're doing that early letter formation, we're seeing letters being formed incorrectly. So for example, if we're thinking of a basic letter like the letter O, the letter O, we'd want a child to start at the top and to go round in an anti-clockwise motion. However, I see lots of children, my own son included, starting at the bottom and going up and round. Or if they're writing the letter A, we would want them to start at the top, to go round, up and back down again. Lots of children will start at the bottom and go up and then sort of swirl off for the tail of the A. So it looks correct-ish, but we know that it's not the correct formation. And then when they come to write a word or a sentence, it really starts to hold them back if they've got poor letter formation. Some phonics programs use some phrases to help children get that correct letter formation. So if your child is in a school that teaches Read, Write, Ink or Little Wandle, some of the other phonics programs as well, they use a phrase that goes with the sound and that helps the children to get the right formation. It's worth checking with your school if your child's letter formation does need some work. Do you have some handwriting phrases that you teach? And if so, can you tell, can you ask them what they are so that you can help with that at home? My son's school teaches one of those programs that has the letter formation phrase. I know what they are, so I can really help him. If he's about to start his at the bottom, I can just remind him, oh, remember, and then give him the phrase, and he then knows where to start. So it's worth checking if your school has the letter formation phrases where you could then use that at home as well. Having good fine motor skills does also depend on good gross motor skills. So we have to have quite a lot of strength actually to be able to write, because it starts from our core. So really, to be able to write nicely, children should be sat at a table. I would really always encourage sat at a table for writing rather than on the floor cross-legged, because it's giving them the wrong hunched over writing, and that will start to hurt as well. And they'll say, I don't like writing because it hurts. And of course it hurts, their body's in the wrong position. So they should be at a table, they should be about a fist away from the table, and be able to easily rest their elbows on the table so they can hold their page still. That takes quite a lot of core strength. So for lots of children, they might not have that core strength yet. And obviously if they haven't got it here, that core strength, it coming through their arms and their hands is going to be harder. So actually working on their gross motor skills first is a good one. That might be things like balancing, going to the park and working on those little obstacle courses where you've got like a balance beam. That's going to really strengthen their core, which is then going to help their arms and their hands to deal with that pencil grip and that fine motor skill. Throwing a ball, all of this kind of stuff that you could do outside will help their gross motor skills, help them build up that core muscle, those tummy muscles, so they're strong, ready for those fine motor skills. So just think about that. Think about, can you work on those gross motor skills first? And obviously you can just look at Google and look at, any gross motor skill activities, but you're going to find things like kicking a ball, throwing a ball, going on a balance beam, whatever it might be, anything to develop that core strength and will be good for their fine motor skills. And then finally, muscle memory. So just thinking about that letter formation again, if the letter formation is incorrect, every time that child writes the letter incorrectly, it is making its way into their muscle memory. So the earlier you can get that correct letter formation into their muscle memory, the better. Often I see a child who's maybe in year 3 or year 4 and their letter formation is really poor and they're really struggling with their writing because of course they can't get any flow because their letter formation is not correct. And actually it's so hard by that age to undo it because it's really cemented in their muscle memory. So if you've got young children, 4-year-olds at home, 5-year-olds who are learning to write, always correct their letter formation because every time it's wrong, it's going into their muscle memory and it's cementing into their muscle memory. So just bear that in mind. So things to try then, ideas to try at home. I have talked about this, but let's just summarize. Find out what phonics program the school uses and if they have handwriting phrases to match, because if you can use those handwriting phrases at home, it keeps it consistent between home and school, and it also gives you an idea on how to actually help them get that correct formation. Handwriting in the air. So if your child is not enjoying having a go on paper, don't worry, they could just do it in the air instead. Nice and big in the air, trying to get that letter formation correct in the air first. I would do this rather than them having a go in sand or glitter, because if they write in sand or glitter, normally they're using a finger, and that's not what we want. We don't want to encourage finger writing. We always want them to be holding crocodile fingers. So I would say crocodile fingers in the air and get them to have a go in the air first, so it's nice and big. If they then don't want to have a go on the page, don't worry, you're still working on that correct letter formation and you're going from gross to fine motor skill by going from air down to the page. There is lots of things that you can do as well to develop fine motor skill control. Play-Doh is good because they're squidging the Play-Doh, they're developing those fine motor skills, rolling the Play-Doh, building objects, doing this as well. If they're rolling like a sausage shape, or they might be twiddling it between their fingers here. This is really good. You can see, look, it's the same the same actions that they'll be using with their pen or their pencil. So Play-Doh is a good one. Threading, so and again, like you can see, we've got that same kinesthetic motion there as we have with our crocodile fingers. Threading, weaving, tweezering. Why is that another good one? Again, because we're using the same grip as we are with our pencil. So you can get lots of little like tweezer games on Amazon. I got one for my son, which was like a counting bear game, and they have all different like cupcake cases, all different colours, and the bears all match up with the cupcake cases, and they have to tweezer the bear into the right cupcake case. So just things like that you can do, good tweezer control, which also is good for their pencil control as well. And then things like gardening and cooking and playing with the ball and playing on the balance beam, all of those things are going to help to develop their motor control skills. So, gardening, we're looking at shoveling soil and putting it into the right pot. So we're really controlling what we're doing with our hands. Cooking, chopping, obviously with supervision from you. Chopping things, also you can see it's using that same sort of grip, so we're using the same kinesthetic motion, chopping up vegetables and ready to go into the dinner. All of those things are going to help. Okay, take a moment to reflect. What could you try at home to support your child's letter formation? Just take a moment to have a think and then we'll move on. Okay, we're going to move on now to have a look at spelling. Spelling, of course, needs to be correct at some point. However, I want us to be realistic. If our children don't know the sounds in the words yet, there's no way that they're going to be able to spell correctly. I am very much in the camp of just let them have a go. If it's phonetically plausible, especially if they're younger, or if they have an additional need and we're saying, actually, that's probably the best that they can do right now with that word, then just leave it. Because the more that we correct spelling, the more that child is feeling demotivated by what they're trying. So just, especially at home, let them have a go, be realistic. If they don't know the sounds yet, then just let them have a go with the sounds that they do know. When we're spelling, we need children to do that encoding process. So they're going to say the word out loud, they're going to say each sound in the word, and then they're going to write them down. And that helps the child to get all of those sounds in the word first, and then to write it down. Also, if they're saying the sounds out loud, you can check they've got those correct sounds. So actually, I was working with a child yesterday, and they were writing the word first, as in first, not second. And I got him to say first, and he said to me, thirst. And then I knew, hang on, no, it's first. So then I knew that he was going to write st. And I said, no, that's not right. Let's do our sounds again. First. So we made sure that he had those sounds correctly first and that he'd said all of those individual sounds in the word before he wrote them down. And that does help children to be successful because it means they've got all the sounds in their head before getting them on the page. And it also means they're not going to just miss out sounds and skip bits over. And I do see that with my son at home. So if I'm not with him, but he's written something, he does tend to just miss out sounds from words. So he kind of writes like the beginning, middle, and end of a word, but there won't be all the sounds in the middle. So if I am there, I will say, oh, what word is it you want to write? And then we say all the sounds in the word and then we write it down. And then that does help the word to be more accurate. Even if he's just using the version of the sound that he knows, I'll still allow that, that's fine. But trying to really isolate all those sounds in the word before they write them down, that helps. Otherwise, we end up with words that are just missing complete chunks of sounds because they're just kind of hearing lazily, if you like, the bits that they can hear. So should we correct incorrect spelling? I think I've already covered this. If your child should know those sounds, then yes, I would look at correcting it, but just gently. Oh, did you know that? Let's have a look at that word again. Let's say all the sounds in that word. Oh, look, you're missing a bit there. And with the boy I was working with yesterday, I didn't let him go wrong and write the word thirst. I said, oh, hang on, it's first. So we're making sure that we're actually doing what we can before they do their writing to make sure it's correct before it goes on the page. Obviously, you can't be there for every time your child ever writes anything, so it's not always going to work. However, I would try to get them to be successful first before they write the word down, rather than just saying, well, have a go and then I'll have a look. Try to get them saying the sounds first and then writing them down. Teach spelling, don't test it. I am not a fan of spelling tests, especially for young children. I think I did a reel on this a couple of months ago. I don't love spelling lists going home because actually all we're encouraging children to do is to do that old school, look at the word, cover it up, write it, check it, look at the word, cover it up, write it, check it. And I feel like that's quite a kind of 90s way of teaching spelling. And spelling lists do, you know, if parents don't know how to teach spelling, they're probably going to teach it in the same way that I learned to spell, which was memorize the word, cover it up and keep writing it until you've got it. That's not a phonetically good way to spell, to learn to spell, because we're just then memorizing a word by sight and we're writing it by sight. Instead, I would prefer to teach the child the words. We're not testing it at the end. I'm not doing a test, but we maybe take a chunk, a sort of collection of words each week, and in that week, we're looking at each word, breaking it down into its sounds, saying the sounds out loud and then writing them down. We're teaching it in that way rather than just sending home a list and testing it. If your schools are sending home a spelling test list, then use the strategies I've given you. So for each word, say it, break it into its sounds, then write those down, rather than just looking at it, covering it and giving it a go writing it. So we're really encoding, we're breaking the word into sounds and then writing them down. Common exception words is the exception to this rule. Common exception words are those high frequency words like said, does, my, of, etc., where the children are essentially learning them by sight. They're learning that there's a tricky part in that word, and that they have to just learn what that word says. So these might be called common exception words, they might be called tricky words, they might be called red words. I heard them being called ticket words, gem words, all sorts of words schools call them, but they are common exception words, words we see a lot, but we can't decode very easily. With these words, we do have to go back to a more 90s way of spelling, where we're maybe identifying where that tricky part is, the bit that might catch us out, and we're just learning how to write that down. So if we're spelling the word said, we know that the s is okay, that looks how it should, and the d is okay, that looks how it should, but the e in the middle is made up of two letters that don't look as we're expecting them to, and we just have to learn how to write those down within that word said. There might be some occasions where we have same sound, different spelling. So there might be, let's take our examples from earlier, green and dream. We've got the same sound. We've got g, e, n in green. We've got d, e, n in dream. E and e, same sound, different spelling. That's my favourite way of explaining it. Same sound, different spelling. And if a child has learnt both versions of that sound, we have to maybe just tell them what that version is. So if they don't know, in green, is it this E or is it this E? Just tell them, rather than saying, well, what do you think it should be? Because they're asking you probably because they don't know. They haven't seen the word enough times for it to be in their orthographic store. Orthographic store is the part of the brain where our words are stored. Once we've learnt them, once they're in our long-term memory, that's where they go. If that word is not in their orthographic store yet, they're not going to know which version of that sound they need. So just tell them. You don't need to sort of test them on that. So same sound, different spelling. But remember, if they don't know the other version of the sound yet, then that's fine. If they've only learnt EE for the sound E, and they're trying to spell dream, and they write DREEM, I wouldn't correct that. They don't know it anyway, so that's the best they can do at this point in time. So only once they've learnt the alternative grapheme that they can then actually make that spelling choice. Use visual aids for this as well. So there are plenty of things you can find online. Letter formation aids. So if your child's school is using a phonics program, they might have some sort of resource they could give to you to show you the letter formation. And all my schools use this. They all have on their desktop the letter formation phrases with the little pictures behind them, so they can really easily look at that to help them with their letter formation. And also you can find charts which give you grapheme choices. So in each box, there's all the different versions of the sound, and they could use that to have a look and identify which sound we're going to use in that particular word. Okay, and that's an example there. So you can see if we look, for example, at the A box, we're looking at the third row down, just after sort of halfway along. We've got AY, first of all, like in the word play. We've got A split E, like in the word cake, and then we've got AI, like in the word snail. These are the different versions of A that we need to use, and we can use that chart to have a look and see which one needs to go in that particular word. So to summarise then, things to try. Focus on 5 words a week maximum. So remember, if we are wanting to help our children with their spelling, it might be that you're getting a spelling list coming home, but if you're not, you can maybe take a few words a week, but 5 maximum. So we're not trying to spell hundreds and hundreds of different words. We're just focusing on a few each week. Ensure that the words that you want them to spell contain sounds your child knows. So if you are wanting to help them with their spelling, that you're making sure, okay, these are the words we're going to look at because you know the sounds in these words. And then remember that strategy that we're saying it, we're breaking it down into its sounds, We might need to then find the correct version on the chart if they're at that point, if they're a bit older, and then we write it down. But that key is saying the sounds in isolation first before writing the word. And then with our common exception words, we can't use this strategy because it contains a tricky part. So we might just need to look at that word as a visual reminder and say, okay, this bit is okay and this bit's okay, but this bit's trying to trick us. So let's just have a look at what that word looks like. Okay, take a moment to reflect on spelling, things that you could try at home to support your child's spelling, and just jot down any ideas if you've got that pen and paper in front of you. Okay, so staying on our sort of secretarial skills, if you like, the next thing to think about is correct spacing. So it doesn't sound like a big one, but actually if children aren't leaving any spaces between their words, then of course that's going to be very hard to read. We use a terminology in school, we call it a finger space. So we know that between two words, we have to leave a finger's width of space so that the person can read that these are two separate words. I thought this was a really kind of obvious one, but actually for my son, he was sort of really struggling with, actually, these are two separate words, so they need to be separate. Even though he's seen that in books from when he was tiny, you know, when you're reading books, they kind of see that the words are spaced out. He's got no real concept yet of using that space between the words. He just writes the whole thing all at once, and then I sort of say, like, but they're different words, so you need to have a space in between. So that's a really big one for us at the minute, is using those finger spaces. So a child can obviously just use their finger to space in between the different words. And again, that comes down to saying it before we write it. So saying the word, writing it down, saying the next word, wait there, we need to use our finger space, and then we write the next word down. Something I always encourage as well, my children in my the younger children in the schools that I work with to do, is leave a line in between their spellings or their writing, so they've just got enough space. Like their writing might be too big to go on lines, and actually if you have got a child who's sort of struggling with the formation and their writing is very big, don't worry, that's okay. You get them to write over 2 lines, or don't use lines at all if they could just write on blank paper. I do think personally that giving them lines is better because it gives them a bit of a guidance, so they do know where to start. However, that's fine, they can write over 2 lines and then make sure you leave a line and go back to the next one. So help them with their spacing so that it can easily be read. And also using highlighter blobs to follow. So again, something that my schools do, if the children are doing some spellings, they'll do little highlighter blobs, leaving a couple of lines or a line in between, so the children know where to do their spelling. And then it just kind of gives them from early on a very clear idea of spacing, so it sort of makes it easier for the person reading it to see. So we might be using finger spaces in between our words if we're writing a sentence, leaving a line if we're sort of going to go on to the next line, and then if we're helping them as well, using highlighter blobs so that they know where to write, especially if if their writing's big, and it's all going to get all in a jumble if they're trying to write one line after the other, using that highlighter blob to help them. I had a look online as well at like finger spacing resources. Obviously a finger is free and it's right there, you don't need to actually do anything, you can just put your finger between the space. However, I did see, as you can see on the pictures, resources like this where you are showing the child they do need that finger space. I don't know why you'd use that necessarily instead of an actual finger, but I just thought that was quite a nice image, put it there, so you can find things like that online. Correct punctuation is another one as well. There's a really lovely, I don't know whether it's like a little program that got developed called Kung Fu punctuation. It's a very fun and visual way to make punctuation as fun as it can be. So they're using like Kung Fu movements and actions for like a full stop. They like do a punch in the air for the full stop, for example. So things like that can help a child that is a bit more that, you know, just needs to kind of do things kinesthetically, using that punctuation mime. So if they're going to write a sentence, saying the sentence and using the punctuation mime at the end to really help them, that Kung Fu punctuation, to help them know, okay, that's where my punctuation needs to go. So it is a nice way of making punctuation fun and visual for children. When you're helping your child to write sentences, you could model this as well. So I talk a lot about modeling. It means showing. So you would be showing the child, you know, if you're going to write a nice simple sentence, saying the sentence, trying to go through each word at a time, and within that word, remember what we're doing. We're saying the word, breaking into its sounds, maybe finding the right grapheme choice, writing it down, using our finger spaces. So, you know, we're trying to show them how we're doing these things, but also we're remarking on the punctuation that we're going to use. I'm at the end of my sentence, I need a full stop, and putting it there. So you're kind of showing them and talking about how you're writing that sentence so they can see that's what we do when we write. There's a lot to think about, as you can see, when we're writing. If we think about all those things so far, we've looked at being able to hold a pencil properly, your motor control, your letter formation, your spacing, your spelling, your punctuation. Even just in a simple sentence, we're having to think of all of these different things. That's a lot for a child. So just think about how you can model that a bit more to show them. And you can start off very simply, you know, start with very simple sentences and then just work your way up from there. In terms of sort of age-related expectations, we wouldn't be expecting like a 4-year-old or a reception child to be able to write a full sentence right now. You know, we're still working at that age on their letter formation and their pencil grip and trying to maybe get some of those sounds into words as well. So we're looking at sort of how we're building up through the years as well as we go through the morning. Okay, just take a moment to reflect then on spacing and punctuation. If this is something your child needs help with, how could you support with this? Okay, so our final chapter is thinking about the ideas. And actually we've looked at all the sort of secretarial skills, if you like, that come with writing: holding the pencil, letter formation, spelling, punctuation, spacing. All of those things are hard enough. Now we're saying, what do you want to write about? And the children are like, I don't know what to write about. So now we're sort of looking at, okay, well, how can we develop some ideas for writing as well? How can we motivate our children to actually want to pick up a pencil and have a go with writing? There are plenty of reasons why children don't want to write. It hurts. They don't have any reason to write. They're worried about their spelling. They haven't got any ideas. So let's take each one of these and just see what we can do to help. First of all, think about the first one. It hurts. Writing does hurt. And again, if we're thinking about our own writing, it's rare that we pick up a pencil. But interestingly, like if I'm colouring or something with my son at home, I'm thinking to myself, that's actually really hurting. And I try not to say that to him, but I think he's actually got almost better sustained motor control than I have because he does it more. You know, obviously for us, we're typing, aren't we? So that's our motor control. But actually holding a pencil like that for a sustained period of time, it does hurt. So we have got to think about that. What can we do to help this? All of those things we looked at already to work on our fine motor skills, strengthening those muscles, like we said before, with Play-Doh, tweezers, cutting, colouring, threading, pegboarding. All of these will help to strengthen their fine motor control muscles, which is going to help. Using the pencil grippers as well, that gets them into what should be a comfortable position for writing, so that might help the hurting as well. Also, just letting them stretch out their hands, so just getting them maybe to write one word, and then let's stretch our hands out to make sure that we're really stretching those muscles, and then let's get back to it. It's funny, I even remember actually as a child, my teacher, I think it was like my year 5 teacher, I remember, said when your hand starts to hurt, put your pencil down, walk around your chair 2 times, stretching your hand out, and then it will be fine. And interestingly, I actually remember doing that as a kid, walking around my chair twice, stretching out my hand, and then going back to writing. So get them to stretch out that hand, because it does hurt. That's a hard position to hold your hand in for a prolonged period of time. They don't have any reason to write. So again, that comes down to your modelling. So just think about that and how much you do at home, and maybe telling them, oh, I need to write a shopping list. And because we're going shopping, I need to remember what I'm going to buy. I need to write this birthday card so this person knows I'm thinking of them. So kind of just dropping in those reasons why you might be writing at home. What's their thing? I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Is it superheroes? Is it animals? Is it unicorns? Is there a reason that they could be writing when we're thinking about what they're into? And I'm going to give you some ideas and some examples in a moment for this. Build it into their game time. So if you're playing superheroes, I'm going to use superheroes as my example because that's what my son's into at the minute. Is there a little opportunity within that game that you could build in a little bit of writing? We're going to look at how we could do that in a minute. And again, like we just said, model your own reasons for writing. Oh, I'm going to write a message. I'm going to leave a note for Daddy to remind him that he needs to take your PE kit into school tomorrow morning. Something like that. You're constantly telling them why we might want to write. Things like birthday cards, shopping lists, labeling a picture, writing a message, writing instructions. All of these things, if we're showing them how we're doing it, and we might be able to build some of this into their play and their game time as well, which we'll look at in a moment, this is going to help them to see a purpose for writing. And that's important because actually otherwise, why are we bothering? Why are we bothering to write if there's no purpose to it? They're worried about spelling. This one, again, we've sort of looked at before. Go easy with spelling whilst children are learning. If they're so worried about spelling that it's stopping them from having a go, I'd almost just back off entirely and just let them have a go. You can see here, and I shared this on one of my stories on my Instagram page, this is my son writing the word tortoise. I knew that he didn't have the right sounds for tortoise. And actually I could have been a bit more strict with it, and I could have said, well, t, or, t, and he could have actually written it maybe a bit more clearly. He's missed out great big chunks of sounds here. However, I just let this go. He's had a go. He wanted to write it himself. He said the sounds that he could hear. I didn't say, actually, that's not right, because he had a go, and I'm happy with that. So I'm, you know, go easy with the spelling, unless there is a reason why they really should be writing it correctly. Gently correct it if it's a word that they really should know. Oh, let's have a think about the sounds in that word. I can hear the sounds t, or, t, tortoise. Not such a good example because actually it's more like tortoise when we're kind of saying it like that to spell. But gently correct what sounds you can hear in the word if you know that they really should be able to write that word correctly. And praise their effort and attempting a word rather than critiquing spelling. So if they've had a go, praise that rather than saying, well, actually the spelling's not right, let's look at it again. And again, use those visual aids to help. So if they are sort of stuck a little bit on their letter formation, what that letter should look like, see if you can get something from the school that goes with what program they're using, some sort of like desktop chart with the sounds on and the pictures to help them, or use a grapheme chart with the different grapheme choices if they're at that place where they're a bit further ahead. Okay, so just take a moment. If your child is sort of thinking about these things as a barrier to writing, it hurts, they haven't got a reason to write, they're worried about their spelling, what could you try at home to help them overcome these barriers? Okay, finally, we're going to have a look at what your child might be into and how we could build some writing opportunities into their play. Now, I don't want this to be all the time, and I certainly wouldn't do this with my own child, you know, every time he plays, oh, let's get out some pens and paper and do some writing as well. But there might just be some little opportunities that you could find to build in some writing into whatever they're playing, whatever they're into. So I've generalised and kind of taken a very broad perspective of what kids might be into at the moment, and I've come up with some ideas to help. So if they're into cars, for example, you could line up their cars into colour. So you could line up all the red cars and all the green cars. And this is in a garage, and we need to write a message to the person who works in the garage to let them know which car belongs to who. So the red car is for mum and the green car is for dad. So you could write mum on this bit of paper and put it at the top of the red car, and green is dad's car, so you could write dad and put that at the top of the green car. So we're just telling the garage whose car needs to go back to who. Something like that, just to build a little bit of writing into playing with cars in a garage. If their thing is dinosaurs, you could get them to draw a dinosaur or print out a picture of a dinosaur, and you could help them to label it for a paleontologist who needs your help. That's the dinosaur's leg, egg. That's his tum, that's his bottom. We need to say bottom for that, bottom. And then if they've got the E sound, we could do teeth and we could do feet as well. But remember, only if they've got those sounds yet. If their thing is diggers, they could write an apology letter for the neighbours for the noise and the mess that the digger's making. So they could do all the digging first and have some fun with that outside. And then we could write a letter that says, dig, mud, crunch, because we're really sorry that that's the mess that our diggers made in the garden. And we could write that, and we could even go and post it through our neighbour's back door letterbox, and you can just tell the neighbour why it's there. But again, just giving that purpose for writing, what could we do to just build it into what they're into? If their thing is superheroes, and this is one I did with my son, could they write a message for the baddie, letting them know who was here? So he was dressed up as Batman. We've got a whiteboard at home, and you can see here, I said to him, oh, what we should do, we should tell the baddie that Batman's been here because that will scare him away. Let's write, I am Batman. And we did that together. And that was just 5 minutes, and I didn't overdo it. I just kind of built it into that little bit of play that we had together. If their thing is animals, could they label pictures of animals they've drawn? So this is also one that I did at home. He's got like a little stencil kit with some animals. We did that together. We did the stenciling, we did the colouring. I coloured that cat in, by the way. His colouring's not that good. And then I said, why don't you label it and say that it's a cat? And he wanted to do the speech bubble himself. So again, just thinking about little opportunities whilst they're playing. If their thing is babies and dolls, they could write instructions of what the baby needs, milk, hug, kiss, sleep. They could leave that as a note for someone who's going to look after the baby while they go out, while they go shopping. Yeah, just thinking about, again, what we can do to build into their play. Emergency services, if policemen and firemen are their thing, we could write a list for what the policeman needs, hat, cuffs, whistle might be a tricky one, but they could try having a go with their sounds there, and giving that letter to somebody who's going to go shopping for the policeman. So just little ideas that you can think of to build into their play. Okay, so let's just recap. We're going to model our own writing as much as we can. The other thing that we can do as well is read high quality storybooks to our child each day. So reading that lovely bedtime story, that will help them with their ideas for writing as well. As we've just said, weaving writing into a game and thinking of the ideas for them in the early stages. They're not going to be able to think about what to write, so help them with their ideas for writing. Model pondering what we're going to write and then writing it down. And this picture here I took, this was one that we did together. Obviously, he's been really heavily helped with his spelling here, but we were you know, I was saying, well, these are the things we're going to do today. And then, like I've been saying about weaving it in, oh, let's write down the jobs that we want to do so that we don't forget anything and we can tick them off as we go along. So, you know, you're just kind of looking at how to build writing into your everyday life together. Okay, take a moment to reflect. What is your child's thing? And how could you build writing opportunities into their play? What might interest them? What might spark that little motivation for writing? Okay, we have come to the end of me talking. Let's just take a moment to sort of think about any takeaways that you're going to take away from the session. And now is a good opportunity as well to jot any questions into the control panel that Camilla can ask me if there's anything specific. If it's a question where I might need to go and think about it and get back to you, that's fine. I'll ask you maybe just to DM me on Instagram instead, because I do sort of try to answer everything I get on Instagram. So if it is something that's really specific to your child that I might need to go away and think a bit more about, I'll just say to DM me a reminder of the question and I'll get back to you that way instead. I can even send you a voice note if you want on Instagram. But yeah, if you've got any questions about anything that you've seen or anything you'd like clarifying, now's a really good opportunity to ask those questions. Is that all right, Camilla?
Yeah, that's perfect. We have actually had so many questions come through already. So yeah, I'll try and get through as many as possible. But like Amy says, if there's something she can't answer, obviously she'll get back to you in her own time. But yeah, that was a fantastic session. Thanks so much, Amy. And we'll get started with the questions. So we have had a lot of questions about spelling and the struggles of, you know, school sending home spelling. There's one saying, should a child who has dyslexia and other learning difficulties come home with 10 spellings a week? He takes a full week learning them and can get 4 to 10 correct. But if I ask him 2 weeks later, he gets them wrong. Is there any advice?
Oh, it's a hard one. Personally, I don't love the fact that he's getting 10 spellings a week. But it's really hard. It's hard for me to say, go to your school and say, no, you don't want that, because obviously that's a school choice, isn't it? And the fact that he's not remembering them anyway means that he's just learning them for that moment and then forgetting them. Maybe have ask for a meeting with your school and just, I would cut that down to 2 or 3 spellings personally for a child who's got dyslexia and other learning difficulties. 10 is a lot of spellings anyway. I just yeah, I don't love the fact that they're sending home 10 spellings to learn. That's just too much in my opinion. It's cognitive overload. So if it were me and it was my child, and obviously this is kind of just my opinion, but I would ask for a meeting with the school, ask to cut down that into sort of 2 or 3 spellings that you can just really spend some time learning properly, and then, you know, look at those strategies that we looked at already, saying the word, breaking the word into sounds, and then writing it down and practicing it that way rather than learning them by sight.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my microphone in time. Another question. My son is in year 1 and has autism and global development delay. He rejects any reading and writing. I've had books thrown at me, meltdowns, etc. And now both myself and mainstream school are reluctant to bring it up. I don't know how to approach it. Is there a best time of day or advice how to make his experience more enjoyable? And where should I start?
Yeah, that's probably a difficult one for me to answer kind of in a 30-second answer without knowing where he is with his reading. I'm guessing that he needs to kind of go back to sounds and blending maybe from what you're saying, but that's a complete assumption, so I don't actually know. If it is a case of going back to sounds and blending, I would go back to some sort of like sound games, some blending games. Could that person send me a DM on Instagram, and I can maybe I can just talk to you a bit more about where it is your child is at, and then some games that I would recommend that you could play, and sort of start like that instead, rather than going through books and pens and paper. Let's kind of go back to just playing some games and trying to get him interested again. But if that person sends me a DM, I'll be able to think of some more ideas when I know what that child can do.
Yeah, can you just share your Instagram account name just so they can find you?
Yeah, it's at the Phonics Fairy, I believe. Let me just triple check that. I think that's right. I should really know that. I think you asked last time and I needed to double check. Yeah, at the Phonics Fairy it is.
Brilliant, perfect. Another one, so my child is 12, has autism, a language disorder and weak working memory. She still finds writing very difficult. She has speech and language therapy sessions in primary but not secondary. We use language through colour resources, but are there any other resources or fun apps I can use to help her write?
I don't tend to use apps myself, just because I can never really find anything that does the job that I could do better. I would again look at what we've sort of looked at here. So what's that child's thing? You know, how can we motivate her a bit more to want to do the writing, and try to sort of go in that way. Again, feel free to DM me, you know, and I can kind of think a bit more about you for that specific child. But I'd look at, okay, what does she enjoy doing, and how can we make writing a bit more fun for her? What can we think of that's going to motivate her to want to do a bit more?
Brilliant. Also, if a child struggles with sitting still or sitting at a table on a chair because of ADHD, are there any positions or locations you can suggest to support writing without making their whole brain concentrate on just sitting?
Massively. Stand up. So obviously you're going to need to just look at like the table height, because if they're stood up, you still want them to be able to rest their elbows comfortably on a table. So you just kind of need to think, have you got like a table at home where if they're stood up, it is going to be at the right level for them. But often with children with ADHD that I work with, I just get them to stand up to read, because, or a spinning chair, that actually helps as well. I know it doesn't help with writing so much, but children with ADHD for reading, I do find it helps if they can spin, because it just kind of gets them, it sort of, that rhythm I think helps them focus. Just the children that I've worked with specifically, obviously this is me generalizing, but children who have got ADHD I work with, often a spinning chair helps them to keep them focused. But other than that, just get them to stand up. I do find that helps children with ADHD, but you just need to think about the height of the desk where they're writing, but it keeps them more comfortable, I think.
Brilliant. Just a couple more because I know we're running out of time. Any advice for left-handers? I find it really hard to show her how to write.
Yeah, do you know what? There's a really great website actually. I think it's like lefthanded.org or something. It's quite an obvious one. If you type it in, there are some really lovely ideas on how to slant the page properly, what position to keep them in. I can't remember the exact website. Again, if that person DMs me, I'll find it and I'll link it for you. But yeah, there is a really good website, and I had a look because it like 10 different things to help, like how to get the paper in the right position, how to get their body in the right position, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, either have a look yourself, see if you can find it. If not, DM me and I'll find it and link it for you.
Brilliant. And one more, sorry. My 4-year-old son has speech issues. So when sounding out a word, he says the wrong sounds for the word. So it's how he hears himself. How do I correct?
Yeah, that's a really normal one. Please don't worry about that. That will kind of fix itself as time goes on, as his speech gets better. Obviously, if you're there for his writing, you would say it. So you would say that the sounds that he needs. So if he's trying to write the word rat and he says wat, for example, you could just say, watch me, at, and just say the sounds for him so that he knows what those correct sounds are. Obviously, if he's written it independently and you're not there, then there's nothing you can do, but try to tell him what the sounds are yourself before he writes them down, and get him to watch your lips as you do that. That's what I do with children. Watch my lips as I say the sound, so that they're really zoned in on what that sound should be before they write it down.
Brilliant. And unfortunately we've run out of time, so we can't ask any more questions, but as Amy says, if you do have any questions, they can just DM you, can't they? And then yeah, brilliant. So yeah, that brings us to the end of today's webinar, and as I mentioned earlier, I'll send out the recording in the next coming days. And if you found today's session useful, we have a couple more webinars taking place next week. one on Monday the 5th to celebrate National Apprenticeship Week on enabling your child to access apprenticeships, and another webinar on Thursday the 8th to celebrate Children's Mental Health Week on mental health, knowing the science, with Tony Lloyd, the CEO of the ADHD Foundation. We also have another webinar with Amy in March. It's the 7th of March, isn't it? Called